It says in this week's Parsha, "You shall not wear shatnez, wool and linen together." Now, before I became religious, I never heard of shatnez. By comparison, I knew about kosher. I mean, who doesn't? You know, no pork, no shellfish, no bacon, no cheeseburgers. Yet, for a Jew, wearing shatnez is just as much a violation of the Torah as eating pig. So why the huge difference in observance? Why is kashrut a multi-million-dollar industry, while in large communities like Philadelphia or Montreal, there are only a handful of small shatnez testing labs? I think a big part of the explanation has to do with the variety and quantity of food we consume and the complexity of the food manufacturing process. But I wonder if there are also more subtle factors at work. First, there's no rational explanation in the Torah for shatnez. In other words, it's a chok. Now, kosher is also a chok, but it lends itself more readily to rational explanation. Many people, for example, believe that eating kosher is healthier than eating non-kosher. Other people believe that kosher meat, because it comes from an animal that was shechted in a humane manner, is the only morally acceptable meat to consume. Next, let's consider the privacy factor. Shatnez is concealed. It's literally inside our clothes. And whether or not I wear shatnez has little direct bearing on others. By contrast, eating is the ultimate social activity. Now, these two factors, the chok factor and the privacy factor, are possible reasons why the mitzvah of shatnez is so often neglected. But I would argue they are dafka the reasons why the mitzvah of shatnez should be kept. Let's consider them in turn. First, the chok factor. Many of us live Jewishly because of habit, or because of our familiarity with our customs and traditions, or because of a desire to fit into the community, or maybe because of the beauty and wisdom of our heritage, all of which are great, but they're self-serving. Ultimately, Judaism wants us to keep the mitzvahs because God commands them, regardless of whether we understand or appreciate the reasons. The alternative would be to pick and choose from the Torah menu based on whether or not we find something meaningful. And that's a sure path to assimilation. Next, consider the privacy factor. I mean, let's face it, the level of observance that we do when we're among other religious Jews is generally a little higher than the level of observance we do in private. And yet, true righteousness means doing what the Creator commands, regardless of whether anybody sees it, or knows about it, or does likewise. Judaism addresses every facet of life, and thankfully it has more than enough mitzvahs to keep us meaningfully occupied every moment. But as sometimes happens in our history, certain values and mitzvahs become prominent while others recede. I think it's time to revive the mitzvah of shatnez. The Jewish world will acquire greater authenticity and vitality when the mitzvah of shatnez in all too many communities no longer hangs by a thread. Good Shabbos.